As Dave has said, my name is Anne. I'm from the South African Polar Research Infrastructure. And today I'm going to chat to you a little bit about lessons that we've learned in establishing a South African National Antarctic Data Centre. So this is more just looking at a few of the requirements and the challenges that we've faced. So just a bit about the NADCs. So I'm going to try and get through the next 15 minutes without coughing. I think most people in the room know what an NADC is. It's essentially an international institution tasked to manage, preserve, and share data arising from that country's Antarctic research activities. And the NADCs form a key part of the International Antarctic Data Management System, which operates under the guidance of SCAR's Standing Committee on Antarctic Data Management. And we've had lots of discussions in SCADM over the last sort of year or so that it would be very useful for SCAR and for SCADM to offer informed advice and highlight challenges involved in establishing NADCs. And this is, we thought that South Africa, because of the stage that we are at in the very early days of establishing our NADC, that it would be useful if we could use South Africa as a test case, just with the requirements and the challenges that we faced. So I'm busy compiling a report on that. But it's important to note that it needs to be quite general, because of course there will be many localized and many national variables and factors depending on the situation in that country. So just a little bit of background and introduction in South Africa's presence in polar research. We've got 3 research stations. We have one on Marion Island, which is part of the Prince Edward Island archipelago. These are South African islands, and then we've got a station on Gough Island. It's a British-owned island, and we lease some of that for the Meteorological and Research Station. And then we also have Sanai 4 on the Antarctic continent. And the SA Gullis 2 is our icebreaker and resupply vessel. And there's also a lot of oceanographic research that happens from the vessel with the set lines that we sail to our stations every year. So we've got some really nice long-term data sets. And apart from onboard instrumentation, there's a lot of instrumentation in the water as well, so moorings and gliders and Argo and that sort of thing. So in terms of a national Antarctic or polar program, it's quite typical to what a lot of other countries have as well. So from a data perspective, this leads to a lot of different research fields and a lot of different data types that we need to take care of, spanning the terrestrial realm across all of the different sciences into the oceans, sea ice research, space science. We also have engineering data that we'll need to take care of, as well as humanities and social sciences. So needing to deal with all of these different data types obviously presents quite a lot of challenges. And unlike many other international Antarctic programs, South Africa has historically not had a unified repository with a dedicated data management plan. And this means that data is either kept internally, or it's linked to publications, or it's distributed through international repositories. And for us as a country, this diminishes the collective return on investment, as well as our international exposure as an Antarctic research country. And this is where the SAPRI Data Centre comes in. So SAPRI is the South African Polar Research Infrastructure. And the data centre really is to address this need for a unified, trustworthy repository that can look after all of the different research domains. And our aim is to homogenize the data streams and to provide a single point of access. So just a little bit about SAPRI. What are we? We were launched in 2021 under South Africa's Department of Science, Technology and Innovation, and really to ensure the coordination of South Africa's marine and polar research. And this is in recognition of, we have a lot of fragmentation in our polar research program, or the coordination of the program. And SAPRI our aim is to try and ease that. And to maintain and further expand the long-term observational research infrastructures and data sets, and provide seamless access to existing and new research infrastructure. So we are designed as a consortium, and we have different integrated facilities or nodes hosted in different places. There's the hub. There are nodes for long-term observations on the land, of the oceans, a polar lab facility, which is a sub-zero temperature-controlled environment that's going to be built at the University of Cape Town. And then the Data Products and Society node, this is the one that I manage. And we are responsible for quite a lot, not just establishing the data center, but also all of the communications and outreach and marketing and engagement, as well as support to the humanities and social sciences community. So as I said, I'm just going to touch on for a report that I'm putting together for SCADM, I'm just going to touch on a few of the requirements and the challenges that we have faced in establishing our data center. Sorry, hang on. So when it comes to establishing an NADC, what are the key considerations that should be looked at? And this is just from our experience of what we've experienced, and I've put these into kind of 6 broad categories. And it's important to note that there's a lot of overlap between these categories, but these really are things that need to be thought about in the planning phase of the NADC. So these are along the lines of institutional, organizational, that's a tongue twister, and coordination, operational planning and management, technical, legal governance and policy, stakeholder engagement, and sustainability and long-term planning. So if we just look at these categories for the SAPRI data center, so and these are just a few highlights. There will be a lot more than what I'm listing here, and the full details will be available in the report. I'll just touch on a few things here. So the institutional, organizational, and coordination, this is initially largely around the need for a lead institution or consortium to host or manage the NADC, and this should ideally be an institute that has experience in Antarctic research and data. As I've said, there will be localized and national challenges depending on the country and depending on the situation in that country. So for example, for us in South Africa, we struggle with a fragmentation of functions with a split mandate of the coordination of our polar research program, sort of split across different government departments, which makes it quite tricky to work with, and this affects the data side of things as well. The DPS node, as I've mentioned, the umbrella of DPS, we're responsible for quite a lot. So we do find that we have a difficulty with a dilution of our functions because we have such a large scope of work. And this is not always operationally efficient. So my recommendation in the long term is that it should actually split and become sort of separate departments. And then, of course, multiple stakeholders. So we've got stakeholders across government departments, universities, institutes, and coordinating all of these it really can be like herding cats. It's quite complex. On the operational planning and management side, so now that SAPRI is established and the DPS node is established, at an operational level, how do we actually establish the data center? So what is needed and how do we need to get that done? How do we set priorities, setting deliverables, and then work plans with timelines, so short-term and long-term, so the need to put together, right to the end of the SAPRI funding life cycle, which is another 10 years, needing to put budgets and timelines and deliverables in place for that. And all of this has to have auditable evidence. So because we are government funded, we always have to keep our auditors happy. So at every stage, we have to have evidence of what we're doing. And then staffing capacity, well, how many staff do we need? Do we need curators with domain knowledge? But this is tricky because we would just then have an army of curators if we try to do that. And then setting KPIs and work plans for personnel. So more, this is really on kind of the team management level and the task management level. How are you going to do that? For example, are we going to use Jira for our task management? And the one thing to always keep in mind with any of this is that it needs to be adaptable because things change. On the technical side, there's a lot to this one, but I don't have time to go into anything in a lot of detail. But our SAPRI data center is hosted in the data node of our host institute. And this already has systems and infrastructure in place. Our data sits on a repository called the Open Data Platform. This has core trust seal status. So it wasn't a case we didn't have to build our systems and infrastructure from scratch. It's a case of expanding it for SAPRI. So to assess how are we going to do this, what expansion we need, how are we going to do it, what infrastructure do we need, procuring servers within the confines of kind of our procurement systems, what system development needs there are, just essentially what do our stakeholders need from us. And then working on interoperability with other systems and platforms. So again, deciding which ones and how are we going to do this, and again, what data pipelines need to be developed. So we're busy still putting together a scope of work for our technical teams, and this is really for them to be able to prioritize the work and for planning and capacity assessments. But it's really difficult here when we don't know what we don't know. I do often send out user needs assessments to our stakeholders, but people are notoriously really bad at getting back to us with the requirements that they have. So putting a scope of work together is really tricky, and things pop up all the time at the last minute. There's a lot of other things, such as the heterogeneous data sources, many research fields, issues with storage of big data, which I think many people face, QC requiring domain expertise, the development of the front end, metadata standards and vocabularies, historical data, etc. On the legal governance and policy side, so we really are focusing on aligning with international frameworks such as the Antarctic Treaty and the recommendations of SCADM, and then principles such as FAIR. On the national side, we do have policies for open science and for data sharing. However, these are not enforced, so people generally don't do it. So I am in conversations with our national funding agency to implement monitoring and evaluation going forward, so that we can try and get people to make their data available. The SAPRI data policy, we do require that for the projects that we support, that people do need to submit their data to us. Our policy, I'm still busy with that, but it's been delayed because we're currently in tricky negotiations with an MOA for an institute, and that might affect what goes into the policy, so that's on hold for now. But we do have standard operating procedures in place in the meantime for data submissions. And legal stuff, there's also issues around data ownership and sovereignty, mandates of different government departments, agreements such as MOUs and MOAs, data management plans, etc. On the stakeholder engagement side, we recognize that it's really important to foster strong stakeholder relationships. On a national level, we work really hard at building trust with our researchers to encourage them to share their data. We're getting there slowly but surely. We also know and realize how important it is to maintain international community connections. So, for example, with the community here, and then to be involved in committees like SCADM and in SUS. And on that side, SCADM has been really amazing for us and for me. It's a great community of people to lean on and ask advice. So I thank everyone from SCADM who has been helping us with this. We also need to address our fragmented data legacy. We've got historical data all over the place. And we need to find that data and preserve it. So we're launching a project called Safeguarding South Africa's Marine and Polar Data Legacy, Preserving the Past, Enabling Future Use. And this is really focused on historical data and data rescue. I see Dave's fingers. I need to dodge the, dodge the stick. And then I'll try and be quick. And then providing training and capacity building to increase the data management literacy of our researchers and any other data support requirements. Sustainability and long-term planning. So data centers are expensive, so the need to look into stable long-term funding, having closure and contingency plans in place, which we did include in the SAPRI proposal. But anyway, things like long-term data storage for big data will always remain a concern. Political priorities. The situation in the US has made us all a bit unsettled. We realize how quickly political priorities can change. Can I get extra time? Okay. So as data people, we want to preserve data for long-term use and preservation. So political priorities changing so quickly can be really unsettling. So really to avoid reliance on short-term project budgets and building institutional commitment across political cycles are crucial. And that's a wonderful sentence and sounds great to do. But if you know how to do this, please do let me know. So other things that I can add to the report for SCADM, things like implementation steps, lessons from other Antarctic data centers, recommendations, appendices, and if anyone has any suggestions, one of our key considerations is engaging with the international community. So yes, if anyone has any comments or suggestions or questions, I'd be very happy to take them. Thank you.
Very nice. Under time too.
14:53.
Exactly. That was impressive. That was good. Right, we've got time for a couple of questions, if anybody has one. Jonathan's got one.
No, I'll just say it's been so impressive to see SAPRI grow and develop, and it's amazing to see just coming along with leaps and bounds. And I can appreciate all of the work that's gone into it. At least from the Australian Antarctic Data Centre perspective, what's been an interesting piece for us is trying to connect the higher levels of government with our activities. And we've had good luck doing that using by trying to embed performance metrics into the high-level accounting and doing annual reporting. So I'll just leave it at that and say you may also need to think about how you can get visibility of your key indicators and performance at the high government level, because it makes them look at you, which is one edge of the sword, but at the other end, you get their attention, which is the other side.
Thank you. Any response?
Thank you. We do
sort off.
we do a lot of reporting. We have monthly reports, quarterly reports, annual reports, and there are some indicators that do go in there. It's really tricky from the data center side of things because we're not getting people to give us enough data yet, so we don't have a lot to show yet. But yeah, I hope.
All right, so we have time for one more. Anybody else? Oh, I think you're off the hook. Thanks, Anne.